Hello everyone. In this class we will learn about classes and objects, how to create a class, how to create objects of a class, and how to access the members of the class, and we will write a program with classes and objects. So first thing is, what is a class? I have already told you in the very first introduction phase about the differences between structure and a class. A structure is a group of variables belonging to different data types, and all those variables represent attributes or characteristics of one particular object. A class is like an extension of structure wherein it also has various features belonging to a particular object. Along with that, we also bind the functions that can act upon or that can access those variables. That is also binded along with the class itself. That was also called as data encapsulation. Now let us understand how to write a class and how to create an object and access the members using one example. So let me write a student class. So class student, and we write this open and closing parenthesis with a semicolon. Everything that comes inside this class are going to be called as members of the class. Everything that is declared here are called as members. And variables are called as member variables, functions are called as member functions. And here we have three visibility modes. We have visibility modes for the variables or for the members that will be declared inside this class. So the visibility modes are private, protected, and public. So this specifies whether these variables are visible or not outside of this class. All the variables that are declared inside, all the members, it can be variables and functions also, all the members declared inside will be accessible inside the class. Outside the class, which members are accessible and which are not, that is defined by these visibility modes. Private members are not accessible outside the class. Protected members, this is used only for inheritance. So we will see about protected later. So any member which is protected will be accessible only inside the class and in the inherited members, but not outside the class. It is like between private and public. All the members that are public will be accessed outside the class. We will see it with examples. By default, this is default. If I don't specify anything, then it's going to be private mode. So I will not specify anything here. I will write some int roll number, and then I'll write marks. Then we will write one float variable, which is average. These three variables I have declared without writing any visibility mode. It means they are private. It's not wrong to write also. We can mention this private as well. Okay, we can mention private visibility mode, or if we don't mention private visibility mode also, it's going to be private because we have not yet specified anything. And then usually we'll write all the functions in the public mode. Okay. Functions will be written under public visibility mode. Here, what all functions to write? I will write one function to initialize values to these variables, like input function or something. So I'll write void input. Usually in other textbooks you can find it as get data, put data kind of functions, and we can write that way also. I'm writing it as input function. This should take values for roll number and marks. So I will take two integer values, int a and int b, as parameters. That's it. I'm only declaring the functions. We have already seen how to declare functions. You have learnt in functions class under C programming. If you have not watched it, I highly recommend you to watch, because detailedly about functions I have explained there. What is function prototype, what is function definition, and function call with local variables and formal parameters, local parameters, all that have been mentioned. Please go through that. As per that I had told you, if you have attended you will know this. In function prototype, you have to give only the data type name. Variable is not necessary, but giving variable name is not wrong. That is also fine, but it is not necessary. So that's what I had told in my functions class. So same thing I will follow here. I will write only two integer parameters. Okay, it is going to take two integer parameters. The first one will be assigned to roll number, second one will be assigned to marks. Then average will be calculated. Inside this input itself, we will calculate average, assuming marks of some 5 subjects or something. Based on that, I am going to divide by 5 and assume the value for average. Then I will write one display function. Display function doesn't require any parameters. It will display values of all these variables. Okay, so these members are private and these members are public. What is the meaning of this private and public members is, to access members of this class, I have to create an object. Using object, we can access only public members of the class, that is these, accessible outside the class. Okay, accessible outside the class using member of the class, that is using object of the class. That is, you have already used structures in your C programming. We'll create a variable and then we'll use dot operator. Same way here also, if I create S1, S2 as the student objects, I can call S1 dot input, S1 dot display, S2 dot input, S2 dot display. So I will use object name, dot operator and the function name to invoke that particular function. So that is because they are public. These private members are not accessible outside the class. Even using object, you cannot access them. Then what is the point of these members? These will be accessed inside this public functions. So remember, private members cannot be accessed even using the object name from outside the class. We can access only public members. Through this public members, we will assign values, we will display values for these private members. So here I have roll number and marks. Assume we will create a object for student S1. Okay. Now to access these members, I have to use dot operator. So I cannot write S1 dot roll number. Like this I can't write, because roll number and marks and average, these are all private members, right? This is wrong. This we can't write it this way because it is private members, and I can access public members. S1 dot input. Here I'll give these values that are supposed to be initialized for those private members. This is valid. So I'm calling this input function using this object of class and the dot operator. I'm passing all the values required so that inside this function we will be assigning these values to this variables. Okay, and I can write S1 dot display. This is allowed because these are public members. Understood? So private members cannot be accessed using object name and dot operator. Only public members will be accessed. Inside this public members, we will write the code so that we can assign values to these private members and we can display those values with any calculations required. All that will be done inside this public members only. And usual programming practice is where we will write all the variables here in the private section, and we will write all the functions here in the public section. Okay, variables are written under private mode, functions are written under public mode. Can't we write variable under public mode? Yes, we can. Suppose I have written average under public mode, then I will be able to access it using s1 dot average. I can access. If I write this display function in private mode, then I cannot write s1 dot display. As simple as that. Sometimes you might have to write some function in the private mode and you might have to write some variable in the public mode also, but usual practice is all variables are written in private mode and all functions will be written in public mode except some exceptional cases. Okay, now this is function declaration only. Remember what we have done here is we have declared variables and we have declared functions. These are nothing but function prototypes. Next we have to define the functions. Class definition, function definition is done after the class definition. So we have defined a class, we have declared variables, we have declared functions. Next we have to define the functions. When we define function, let me erase this. So when we define the function, we have to mention scope of the function. Scope is to which class it belongs, that needs to be mentioned. Okay, so we have to write. How do we usually define the function? Again, watch my functions video of C programming without fail. If you have watched it, you know, in function declaration we will write data type, return type, name of the function, only name of these data types of the parameters. In function definition we will write return type, function name, data type names along with parameter names, and in the function call we will pass only the names of the variables which are passed to the function definition, right? So here for void input int comma int, return type we will write name of the function is written. Here we'll write the data type along with variable name. Between this return type and name of the function, we need to define the scope. Defining scope involves class name and scope resolution operator. So this defines scope of this function, means to which part of this program does this function belong to. So this code says that input function belongs to student class. Okay, so here this is name of the class, and this is called as the scope resolution operator. Together this name and the scope resolution operator is called as defining the scope of a function. Here we write all the usual code, and in case it is returning any value, we'll write return statement also. And this is your function definition, very similar to your function definition in C, except that here we need to write scope resolution to denote to which class this function belongs. Why this is required is we will be writing programs in our upcoming classes where in one program you will have more than one class, and the same display function and input function will be present in each and every class also. Then I have to write what this is the input function belonging to student class. I might have one more input function belonging to teacher class. Based on which object is used to call this function, appropriate function definition will get called. So to define that, to differentiate that if you have multiple functions with same name belonging to different classes, we have to mention this scope resolution operator and the class name, that is defining the scope. We can also write functions which does not belong to the class. Usual function declaration and function definition, function call, the same procedure can be used here also. But just to keep it simple, we are not going to write any functions which does not belong to the class. Okay, so this is for input function. Next, for display function also we'll write the same way, void student double colon display, and then we'll write the code for that. After writing that, next we will be writing the main function. In the main function, we will create object for student S1, and then we give input values for S1, say 21, 380, something like this. Now inside input function I would have written instructions so that this 21 is assigned to roll number, this 380 is assigned to marks, and average is calculated using some formula. Then I'll give S1 dot display. Inside this display function I would have written the output statements using cout, and we will get the output. So we can create multiple objects, S1, S2, S3 we can create. So when I create multiple objects, values stored in those respective variables will be handled, will be assigned and will be printed. If we have any calculations, everything is with respect to those variables. Hope this is clear. Now there are certain things that you need to keep in mind. That is, I told you we will have variable declaration and function declaration. We will not define it here, but you can define, it's not wrong. If you define, those are considered as inline functions. So what is an inline function is, you can write an inline function with an inline keyword outside the class, or if you're writing it inside the class, then by default it will be an inline function itself. So inline function is a function which is expanded in a single line. A function which is expanded in a single line format. We cannot see this, it happens during execution. in a single line format. Means if you have any small function which has just one or two lines of instructions, then either you can declare that function using an inline keyword. If it is not belonging to a class, you will declare it with an inline keyword. If it belongs to a class, then defining it inside the class makes it inline by default. So there are two ways for giving an inline function. So first way is two ways for defining inline function in your code. One is a function that does not belong to a class. So that is called as non-member function. As I told you earlier, variables belonging to a class are called as member variables. Functions belonging to a class are called as member functions. Non-member functions means those functions which do not belong to any class, just like your independent functions you had written in C program. Okay. If it's a non-member function, then we define it with inline keyword. Okay, inline, then say return type we will write, and name of the function and whatever parameters are there, and your code. So maximum you should have one or two lines of code. That's it, not more than that. Okay, so this is defining a function with inline keyword which has very less code. What is the advantage we will see? This is for non-member functions. If it is member function, that is functions belonging to the class. If it's a member function, then function definition should be included inside the class itself, like this. So if you have written class student and then you have some private members and then you have public, under public you are going to define it here itself, say void display. Here you are not using inline keyword. I'll write the output statement cout, say a is equal to a, then end l, whatever. Okay, so if I have just one or two instruction and I will define this inside the class itself. See, earlier what I have done is I've just declared it here and then we will be defining it here. That is the usual practice. If you define it inside the class definition itself, then this is considered as an inline function. Treated as inline function because it is defined inside the class. Okay, so what is inline function is, I have explained in my C programming functions video about function overhead. So what is function overhead? Sometimes a function task will be so small, and if you are calling a function, there are certain additional work that is involved, like you have the members, you have the variables belonging to a function that needs to be pushed to the memory stack, new level of memory gets created, you have new local variables, that is getting memories getting allotted, values are getting copied. Once all the calculations are done, when you come back to the calling function, the duplicate variables, everything has to be destroyed. So these are all additional work done by the compiler just because you're using functions. If the additional work done is more than the actual task to be done, then they are called as, that is called as function overhead. That is, function overhead is a situation which is created when a function task is much less compared to the additional work done just because we are using a function. In such situations, it is better not to use the function and execute it like normal instructions. This is going to increase compiler's time. If you create inline functions, then this will not be executed like normal function definition. It gets executed like a macro definition. Again, what is macro definition and the difference between macro definition and inline functions, I will do another video. In that you can get it clearly understood. But here you just understand this much. When you define a class, best programming practice is that you have to just declare the functions inside the class. You have to define it outside the class. Okay, so just declaration is inside, definition should be outside. This is function definition. Definition should be outside with scope resolution operator. This is good programming practice. If you have just one or two instructions inside your function, then you can define it inside also. It's not wrong. But if you have more instructions and you define that inside class, you will not get any error, but that will not be considered as inline function. What is the advantage of defining it inside the class is you are telling the compiler to consider it as an inline function. So it will be treated as an inline function. Inline functions are those in which compiler does not do additional work in creating duplicate memories. It won't create duplicate memory, it just expands it like a macro definition. If you know macro definition, using hash define we can define macros in C. If you know macro definition, you will understand what I'm saying. Even if not, don't worry, I'll in my next video I'll explain that. And that will reduce using this inline keyword for non-member functions, or using a function definition inside the classes for small functions will reduce the compiler's time taken for execution. This is one of the examples of code optimization, which is very important for your placement interviews. I've told about this in most of my classes. Whenever you write code, try to optimize the code so that the space taken is less and the time taken is also less for the compiler to execute. That is called as optimization of code. So this will help in optimizing the code only if your function is just 1 or 2 line function, a simple one. And which functions cannot be written as inliners? If you have if-else statements, too many if-else statements, if you have loops, if you have recursion, then if you have pointers, those functions cannot be considered as inline. But giving an inline function for inline keyword for a very big function will never result in an error. Compiler will ignore it. Okay, inline keyword is a request, not a command. So that's what we usually tell about inline keyword. Again, detailed explanation will be given in a different class. Anyway, so this is about how you have to declare a class, define the functions, define an object, and assign values to those members and display them. Now we will use all these and will write a program. I am using code blocks and dev C++. So in these videos you can see in some of the classes I'll be using dev C++, and in some of the classes I will be using code blocks. You can use any of the compilers is available with you. You can use any of them, doesn't matter. Now here we will write one sample program. Okay, and always save the program using a C++ extension, so that sample class.cpp. Okay, so now this will understand that it is a C++ file, and accordingly you will get suggestions when you are typing. Okay, so I'll write sample program with classes and objects. We will write hash include iostream, no .h, just iostream. Then you have to write using namespace std. Okay, and we will define the class. So I will define the class called student. So we have the opening and closing brackets. I am not giving private. It means I am not giving any visibility mode. It means it is private. You can also give private. It is not wrong. Int roll number, marks. Okay, and I will write float average. Now we will write the functions under public mode. So under public mode we will write void input function. I am just going to declare them, int comma int, and then we will write display function. This also I am just declaring it, or I will write display code here itself. They're just to demonstrate that we can write function definition outside the class also, inside the class also. So here I am defining two functions. One is input function, one is display function. Input function I will define it outside the class. Display function I will define it inside the class. Both you can use whichever you feel comfortable. Cout, we have to just display values, right? I will write roll number equals to, it is roll number, and then cout, and we have to go to the next line. For that we need to write endl. I have told you that is end line, and then I will not write total marks. I will write only the average marks. Average, you can display everything, doesn't matter. Here I am displaying only student roll number and the average. So this is display function which is defined inside the class definition itself. Now input function I have just declared it inside the class. I'll define it outside. If I define outside, I have to give return type, then give scope resolution operator, student class and scope resolution operator. Then I'll write name of the function, int a comma int b. Here space, yes. Now what are the values? Roll number equals to a comma marks equals to b. That's all. So this is two values that are assigned to the variables, and for average we are going to calculate the value. So I will write marks divided by 5.0, assuming that it is marks of 5 subjects. I am assigning average marks by calculation. Okay. Next we'll write int main. Here we are supposed to create objects of the type class. So I'll write student s1 comma s2. Okay. s1 dot input means I am passing values to the variables of s1 object. I will give 21 as the roll number, and then I'll write 380 as the marks. Okay. Then I will write s2 dot input means for s2 object I am passing the values. I'll give 22 as roll number and marks I'll write 450. Now when I give s1 dot input, it accesses variables belonging to s1, and when I give s2 dot input, it accesses the variables belonging to s2. Now we are going to display the values. Before displaying, I'll write some output instructions here also. It's not compulsory. So I'll write student1 result. Student1 result, and here I'll write s1 dot display. So this function is going to display the values of the variables belonging to S1. What are we displaying? Only roll number and average marks, not the total marks. If you want, we can display that as well. Now I'll write cout student 2 details or second student result, write whatever you want, just some output statement, that's it. And then s2 dot display. This displays variables values of s2. Okay, so I have written the program and let me save it. After saving, we have to compile. In case we have any errors, it will be displayed here at the bottom, and now there are no errors. Now we will run the program. See, it shows student 1 result is roll number 21, average is 76, and student 2 result is roll number 22 and average is 90. That's how you create a class. You declare variables and functions, and then you define the functions. Then you define objects for the class. You give input values and then you display the values. Now what is the flow of execution? It starts execution from main. We are creating two objects. For S1 and S2, memory is allotted for three variables, for marks, roll number and average. Execution starts from main. In the main function, I have student S1, S2. So I told you memory is created when first object of the class is created. So first a memory is created for all the functions. So what all functions are there here? We have one input function and then we have one display function. So display function has some code, input function has some code. Okay, then when we create object of first object of this type, so this is for student. When I create first object of this type, memory is allotted. So first object is S1. So student S1 comma S2 is there. So this is S1. For S1 we will have roll number, okay, and then we have marks and we have average. So memory is allotted for all the variables belonging to S1, and for S2 also same thing, roll number, marks and average. Okay, these two memories are created. Now when I give S1 dot input, 21 comma 380. It means I am calling this function using this object. Inside input function, I have written roll number equals to x, marks roll numbers equal to a, marks equals to b, and average equals to marks by 5.0. That is going to assign these values into these variables because I am calling s1. So when inside a function we are referring to these variables roll number, marks and average without object name and dot operator, because I am calling this function using an object, and inside this function if I write roll number or marks, any code, that is with reference to the variables belonging to this object only. So 21 gets stored here and 380 gets stored here, and then here division is done and some 76 or something is stored. Next, when I write s2 dot input, same input function is called but with a different variable. When I call with a different object, these values are assigned to variables belonging to s2. So inside this input function, roll number and marks refers to this one because I have used this object to call. So here 22 and 480 are assigned and then some value is stored here. Similarly, when I write s1.display, it is going to access variables of this one, and s2.display will display values of these variables. So this is how memory is allotted internally, and when you access the functions using the objects, it is going to refer to the variables belonging to those objects. So this is how we create classes and we declare objects and access the members using the objects. And in the next class, we will be learning about function overloading and various other features with reference to classes. And for detailed notes on these subjects and lot of placement questions, you can join the Telegram channel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that whenever we announce any class, you will get notifications for that. See you in the next class. Bye bye.